The examination hall. The testing hall stretched across the entire north wing of the Galactic Military Academy. Rows of adaptive desks accommodated species of every imaginable shape and size. Some cadets sat on traditional chairs, others floated in suspension fields, and a few rested on heated rocks that matched their homeworld environments. The air hummed with nervous energy as 200 cadets prepared for their final examination in advanced hostile target elimination theory. Do-hyun Kim sat at desk 47, trying not to think about how much rode on this test. His human fingers looked small and pink compared to the clawed, scaled, or chitinous appendages around him. At 24 years old, he was one of only 3 humans in the entire Academy. The Galactic Council had accepted Earth into their alliance just 2 years ago, and humanity was still proving itself worthy of the invitation. Most alien species viewed humans with polite skepticism. They seemed fascinated by human emotional displays and confused by human social bonds. The prevailing opinion among the galactic community was that humans were too impulsive, too emotional, and far too attached to concepts like honor and revenge to make good strategic thinkers. Several prominent military analysts had published papers questioning whether humans should be allowed in military academies at all. Instructor Velrith glided between the rows on his 4 combat tendrils. His purple chitinous armor gleamed under the artificial lights. He had fought in 17 campaigns and taught strategy for 30 cycles. His reputation for harsh grading was legendary across 3 sectors. When he reached the human section of the hall, his head tilted slightly in what Do-hyun had learned was a Quellan expression of doubt. "Cadets!" Velrith's translator rendered his clicks and whistles into Galactic Standard. "You have 4 hours to complete this examination. Quality matters more than speed. Think carefully before you respond." The holographic displays flickered to life above each desk. Do-hyun leaned forward to read the question that appeared in glowing blue text. "You are commanding a strike force tasked with eliminating a fortified enemy position. The position contains both military targets and civilian infrastructure. Describe 3 viable methods to eliminate this threat with minimal collateral damage. Each method must include tactical approach, resource requirements, estimated timeline, and potential complications." Around the hall, cadets began typing, writing, or dictating their responses. A Throrian cadet 3 rows ahead opened all 6 of his eyes wide, a sign of deep concentration. A gaseous Vrellan cadet's containment suit glowed brighter as she pondered the question. The Quellan cadets, Velrith's own species, moved their tendrils in small patterns as they thought through various scenarios. Do-hyun read the question again. 3 methods. Minimal collateral damage. He tapped his fingers on the desk's edge, a human habit that often annoyed his alien classmates. His mind began sorting through years of tactical study, not just from the Academy but from before, from Earth. He had grown up in the aftermath of the resource wars. His grandfather had fought in the AI uprising. His mother had been a tactical analyst during the Pacific reunification. Humanity's history was soaked in blood and warfare. For 10,000 years, humans had fought each other with increasing sophistication and brutality. Every generation had found new ways to kill, new strategies to employ, new psychological weapons to deploy. The Academy had taught him galactic standard warfare, but Earth had taught him something else entirely. Do-hyun's fingers began moving across his datapad. He started with the conventional approaches. Method 1 covered standard orbital bombardment with precision targeting. Method 2 detailed siege tactics with supply interdiction. Method 3 explored biological containment protocols. These were the answers Velrith expected: safe, strategic, by-the-book responses. But the question had said, viable methods. It hadn't specified which 3. It hadn't said, only 3. Do-hyun kept writing. Method 4 described psychological warfare protocols. Method 5 detailed economic strangulation techniques. Method 6 explored cultural exploitation strategies. His fingers moved faster. Method 7, 8, 9. Environmental engineering, acoustic weaponization, temporal supply disruption. The methods poured out of him like water from a broken dam. Across the aisle, Myung Park glanced over at him. She was one of the other two humans in the academy, a logistics specialist with a gift for resource management. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw how fast Do-hyun was typing. She mouthed a single word. "Stop?" Do-hyun shook his head slightly and kept writing. Gravity, well manipulation. Strategic communication falsification, automated system corruption, demographic pressure tactics, historical grievance exploitation, religious prohibition weaponization. Each method was detailed and specific. Each one was technically viable. Each one drew from humanity's long and terrible history of finding new ways to defeat enemies. Method 30 described a combination approach that synthesized elements from the previous 29. Do-hyun reviewed his work once, made a few corrections, and submitted his datapad. The display above his desk showed his completion time, 40 minutes and 17 seconds. Around the hall, other cadets were still on their first or second methods. Some wouldn't finish all three in the allotted 4 hours. The Throrian cadet was still staring at his screen with all 6 eyes. A Mintak cadet had started over twice already, erasing her chemical trail each time. Do-hyun stood carefully, trying not to draw attention. He placed his datapad in the collection field and walked toward the exit. Velrith's head swiveled to track his movement. The instructor's tendrils curled in what Do-hyun recognized as confusion. "Cadet Kim," Velrith said. "You are submitting early?" "Yes, instructor. I've completed the examination." "The examination asks for 3 methods. You understand this?" "Yes, instructor. I provided 3 viable methods as requested." Velrith's translator carried a tone of suspicion. "You completed this in 40 minutes?" "The question was clear, instructor. I answered it to the best of my ability." Velrith's tendrils rippled in a way that suggested doubt. He retrieved Do-hyun's datapad from the collection field and began scrolling through the response. His compound eyes widened. He scrolled faster. His tendrils began to tremble slightly. Do-hyun stood quietly, waiting to be dismissed. Around the hall, a few other cadets had noticed the interaction and were watching with curiosity. Velrith reached Method 4. His entire body went rigid. The trembling in his tendrils increased. His breathing spiracles opened wide. The datapad slipped from his grip and clattered on the floor. "Instructor?" Do-hyun stepped forward. "Are you all right?" Velrith's legs buckled. His tendrils failed to catch him. He collapsed backward, his chitinous armor scraping against the floor. Red warning lights began flashing across his biomonitor harness. "Medical emergency!" Do-hyun shouted. "Instructor Velrith needs assistance!" The examination hall erupted into chaos. Medical drones descended from ceiling ports. Cadets jumped up from their desks. 2 assistant instructors rushed forward. One of them, a Quellan named Thraxis, grabbed the fallen datapad and began reading Do-hyun's response. His reaction was only slightly less dramatic than Velrith's. "By the Founders," Thraxis whispered. "What is this?" Medical drones surrounded Velrith, scanning his vital signs and administering stabilizing chemicals. His eyes flickered between consciousness and unconsciousness. One tendril lifted weakly and pointed at Do-hyun. "Human," Velrith's voice was barely audible through his translator. "What have you done?" The response. The medical bay's lights were dim and soothing, designed to comfort injured beings from across the galaxy. Instructor Velrith rested on a specialized platform that supported his 4 tendrils while medical equipment monitored his recovery. His purple chitin had lost some of its shine, and his movements were slow and careful. 3 days had passed since his collapse in the examination hall. Do-hyun stood outside the medical bay with Mi-young and Tae-jin Choi, the 3rd human cadet. They had been summoned by Overseer Threnok himself. Nobody had explained why Velrith had collapsed. Nobody had told them if Do-hyun's examination would be graded. The uncertainty gnawed at all three humans. "You really wrote 30 methods?" Taejin asked quietly. He was the youngest of the three humans, barely 22, with a specialty in xenobiology. "I thought the question asked for 3. It asked for 3 viable methods," Do-hyun said. "I provided 30 viable methods. There's no rule against exceeding requirements." Mi-young shook her head. "Do-hyun, you made an instructor faint. That's not normal." Before Do-hyun could respond, the medical bay doors opened. Overseer Threnok emerged, his massive form filling the doorway. Threnok was a Vorgath, built like a walking tank with thick gray skin and small, intelligent eyes. He had commanded fleets during the Krenth border wars and lost his left arm in the Battle of Crimson Nebula. The prosthetic replacement gleamed dully in the corridor light. "Cadet Kim," Threnok's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Inside. Now." Do-hyun followed the Overseer back into the medical bay. Velrith was awake, his compound eyes tracking Do-hyun's movement. Several other instructors had gathered around a holographic display that showed Do-hyun's examination response. Their expressions ranged from shock to fascination to horror. Threnok picked up a data pad and began reading aloud. Method 4, Psychological Warfare Protocol. Convince the enemy their own command has abandoned them through falsified communications, fabricated evidence of leadership evacuation, and strategic misinformation about relief forces. Include authentic-looking orders for retreat that never came, falsified casualty reports showing leadership deaths, and carefully timed disruptions of their communication networks to prevent verification. Estimated timeline, 72 hours until surrender without firing a shot. Complications, requires detailed intelligence on enemy command structure, native speakers for communication falsification, and careful timing to prevent discovery before psychological impact takes hold. The Overseer stopped reading and looked at Do-hyun. "This method would work." "Yes, Overseer. It's also ruthless, manipulative, and psychologically devastating to the enemy." "Yes, Overseer." "And this is only Method 4. Threnok scrolled through the datapad. "Method 7 suggests using acoustic weapons tuned to the specific frequency that causes pain in the target species. Method 12 proposes contaminating their water supply with substances that cause temporary but intense paranoia. Method 17 details how to manipulate their cultural symbols to create internal conflict. An instructor named Philaxis, a crystalline being who taught ethics, spoke up. Her voice chimed like breaking glass. "These methods border on war crimes under Galactic Convention." Do-hyun kept his expression neutral. The question asked for viable methods to eliminate a fortified position with minimal collateral damage. It didn't specify ethical constraints. Every method I described would work, and most of them would result in fewer deaths than conventional assault. "Fewer deaths," Velrith said weakly from his platform, "but far more suffering." "War is suffering, Instructor," Do-hyun replied quietly. "I simply documented methods that minimize death while achieving the objective." Threnok set down the datapad and crossed his arms. "Where did you learn these tactics, Cadet Kim? The Academy doesn't teach half of these approaches." "Earth, Overseer. Human history is full of examples." "You studied military history?" "My family has been involved in military service for generations. My mother was a tactical analyst. My grandfather fought in the AI uprising. Before joining the Academy, I studied every major conflict in human history going back 5,000 years. Threnok's eyes narrowed. "And humans have used all these methods?" "Yes, Overseer. At various times, in various conflicts, humans have employed every tactic I listed. Some worked better than others. Some we decided never to use again. But the knowledge remains." Philaxis chimed in again, her crystalline structure flickering with agitation. This is exactly what the Council feared when they debated accepting humanity. You're too violent, too creative in your violence. Do-Yun turned to face her. With respect, Instructor, every species in this academy comes from a world with military history. The difference is that humans spent 10,000 years fighting each other before we reached the stars. We had time to try everything. And that makes you proud? Phylaxis asked. No, Instructor, it makes me informed. Velrith shifted on his platform, drawing everyone's attention. I collapsed because when I read Method 4, I suddenly understood what humanity truly is. You're not warriors like the Vorgath, who fight with honor. You're not strategists like the Quellans, who value elegance in tactics. You're survivors who learned that victory matters more than method. Do-Yun said nothing. There was nothing to say. Velrith was right. Threnak picked up another datapad. Method 23 describes how to use economic pressure to force surrender by targeting the enemy's trade partners and making it financially ruinous to support them. Method 26 suggests releasing carefully edited footage of enemy war crimes, real or fabricated, to turn public opinion against them. Method 29 proposes introducing addictive substances into enemy supply lines to degrade combat effectiveness over time. Each method is detailed, specific, and terrifying in its efficiency, Threnak continued. And you thought of all 30 and 40 minutes? No, Overseer. I've thought about tactical problems my entire life. The examination just gave me an opportunity to write them down. The room fell silent. The instructors exchanged glances. Finally, Threnak spoke again. The Council is meeting tomorrow to discuss your examination. There are those who believe you should be expelled for this response. They argue that you've demonstrated a mindset incompatible with galactic military service. Do-Hyun's heart sank, but he kept his face calm. I understand, Overseer. However, Threnak continued, there are others who believe you've demonstrated exactly the kind of innovative thinking the Galactic Defense Force needs. Wars are changing. The old methods don't always work anymore. Before anyone could respond, an alarm began blaring throughout the medical bay. Red emergency lights flashed. A holographic display materialized in the center of the room showing a star map with multiple red indicators spreading across the outer colonies. A communication officer's voice crackled through the speakers. Emergency alert! The Krenth swarm has launched a full-scale invasion of the outer colonies. Initial defense forces have been overwhelmed. The Council is requesting immediate strategic consultation from all senior military staff. Threnak's expression darkened. The Krenth were an insectoid species known for their aggressive expansion and overwhelming numbers. They had been a border threat for decades, but never launched an invasion of this scale. Velrith struggled to sit up on his platform. How many colony worlds? 7 confirmed under attack, Overseer, the communication officer responded. Estimate 20 million civilians in immediate danger. The instructors began moving toward the door, their various appendages, tendrils, and limbs creating a chaotic exit. Threnak paused at the doorway and looked back at Do-Hyun. Come with me, Cadet Kim, and bring that datapad. Overseer. The Council wanted to debate whether your methods are too brutal for galactic warfare, Threnak said grimly. The Krenth just made that debate irrelevant. If your examination frightened us, maybe it will frighten them too. Do-Yun followed the Overseer out of the medical bay, his mind already racing through tactical possibilities. Behind them, Velrith called out weakly. Kim! Do-Yun turned back. Don't hold back, Velrith said. Show them everything humanity learned in those 10,000 years of fighting yourselves. The Krenth won't care about ethics. Neither should you. The Council Chamber. The Council Chamber occupied the highest level of the Academy's central spire. Its walls were transparent, offering a view of the orbital station's curved hull and the planet below. 12 seats arranged in a circle represented the major species of the Galactic Council. Each seat was designed for its occupant's unique physiology, from the water-filled tank for the Aquarian representative to the magnetic suspension field for the Pylothian energy being. Do-hyun stood in the center of the circle, feeling very small and very human. Mi-young and Tae-jin stood behind him, called as witnesses. The weight of 12 alien gazes pressed down on him from all sides. Some looked curious, others hostile, and a few simply confused. Overseer Threnok sat in the Vorgoth seat, his massive frame making the reinforced chair look normal-sized. To his right, Instructor Phylaxis occupied the crystalline seat designed for her species. Velrith was absent, still recovering in medical, but another Quellan named Syraxis represented his species. The chamber's center displayed a holographic projection of Do-hyun's examination response. All 30 methods floated in glowing text, rotating slowly for all to see. The Aquarian representative, whose name translated roughly to Current Keeper, spoke first. His voice bubbled through his translation device. This human cadet submitted a response that hospitalized an instructor. We must address whether such thinking has any place in our military academy. The instructor's medical episode was not the cadet's fault, Threnok countered. Velrith was shocked by the content, but that's not a punishable offense. The content is the issue, Phylaxis chimed. Her crystalline structure pulsed with agitated light. Method 12 suggests contaminating water supplies. Method 17 exploits religious beliefs. Method 29 proposes drug warfare. These are not honorable tactics. Do-hyun remained silent, as instructed. Overseer Threnok had told him to speak only when directly questioned. The council would debate first. A new voice entered the conversation. It came from the doorway, where a tall human woman in Earth Defense Forces uniform had just entered. Her rank insignia marked her as an admiral. Her name tag read, Bayek. Honorable tactics, Admiral Sunhee Bayek said as she walked into the chamber, are a luxury afforded to those who win. The Krenth swarm currently burning through the outer colonies doesn't care about honor. Current Keeper's tank bubbled with agitation. Admiral Bayek, this is a closed council session, which you interrupted with an emergency summons 3 hours ago, Beck replied calmly. You requested Earth's strategic assessment of the Krenth invasion. I'm here to provide it. And I understand you're considering expelling the only 3 human cadets in your academy. They are not being expelled, Threnok said. The Council is reviewing Cadet Kim's examination response to determine if it violates our ethical guidelines. May I see this terrible response? Beck asked. Syraxis, the Quellan representative, gestured to the holographic display. The methods speak for themselves. They demonstrate a disturbing capacity for psychological manipulation and targeted cruelty. Admiral Bayek read through the list, her expression never changing. When she finished, she turned to face the council. I see 30 viable tactical approaches, some conventional, some innovative, all effective. What exactly is the problem? The problem, Phylaxis said, is that several of these methods constitute war crimes under Galactic Convention. Which articles specifically? Beck asked. Phylaxis paused. Well, the Convention prohibits unnecessary suffering and Article 7. Section 3 defines unnecessary suffering as inflicting pain or death beyond what is required to achieve military objectives, Bayek interrupted. Most of Cadet Kim's methods would result in fewer casualties than conventional assault. Article 12, Section 8 prohibits targeting civilians. None of his methods specifically target civilians. Article 19 prohibits weapons that cause indiscriminate damage. None apply here either. The Admiral walked closer to the center of the chamber. The real problem isn't that these methods violate your conventions. The problem is that they're human methods, and you're not comfortable with how humans think about warfare. Humans are violent, Current Keeper stated. Your history proves this. Constant warfare, genocide, weapons of mass destruction. You nearly destroyed yourselves multiple times. Yes, Beck agreed calmly. We did. And that experience taught us lessons you've never had to learn. When was the last time your species faced extinction from a war? Current Keeper's tank rippled. We are a peaceful species. We resolve conflicts through diplomacy. Because you've never faced an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with, Beck said. The Krenth can't be negotiated with. They don't want territory or resources in the way you understand. They want to consume and expand. Your diplomatic approaches have failed for 40 years. Your military approaches are failing right now. Threnak leaned forward. Admiral Beck raises a valid point. Traditional Galactic Defense Force tactics aren't working against the Krenth. They adapt too quickly, reproduce too fast, and operate on principles we don't fully understand. So your solution is to employ war crimes? Phylaxis asked. Do-Yun spoke for the first time. With respect, Instructor, I didn't suggest employing war crimes. I answered an examination question about viable elimination methods. The question didn't specify ethical constraints. All eyes turned to him. Current Keeper's voice bubbled with interest. You're saying you don't actually advocate using these methods? I'm saying knowledge and application are different things, Do-Hyun replied. A doctor knows how to cause death as well as prevent it. That knowledge doesn't make them a murderer. It makes them informed. Saraxis's tendrils curled in thought. An interesting distinction. But why write 30 methods when only 3 were required? Do-Hyun took a breath. Because the question asked for viable methods. Plural. It didn't limit the number. I provided comprehensive options because comprehensive knowledge saves lives. If a commander knows 30 ways to solve a problem, they can choose the one that causes the least harm. Or causes the most, Phylaxis countered. That's a choice, not a capability, Mi-Young spoke up from behind Do-Hyun. Do-Hyun gave you tools. How you use tools determines whether they're helpful or harmful. Taejin added, every medical drug can heal or poison depending on dosage. Every technology can build or destroy. The knowledge isn't evil. The application can be. Admiral Bayek smiled slightly. My cadets make good points. You're not debating whether Cadet Kim is dangerous. You're debating whether humanity is dangerous. And I'll save you time with that discussion. Yes, we are. We're very dangerous. We learned to be dangerous because we had to survive against ourselves for 10,000 years. The council chamber fell silent. The holographic display continued rotating slowly, showing all 30 methods in cold, clinical detail. Finally, Threnak spoke. The Krenth invasion changes everything. We've lost contact with 3 colonies in the last hour. Conventional responses aren't working. Admiral Bayek, what is Earth's strategic assessment? The Krenth operate on pheromone-based communication and hive-mind decision-making, Bayek said. Your attacks target their physical forces, but you're not disrupting their command structure because you don't understand how it works. You need someone who thinks differently. Someone who can identify weaknesses you haven't considered. Current Keeper's tank bubbled slowly. You're suggesting we use the human cadet's methods against the Krenth? I'm suggesting you give him 48 hours to analyze the problem, Beck said. Let him and his fellow humans review your intelligence data. See what they come up with. If you don't like their solution, you lose nothing but time. If you do like it, you might save millions of lives. Saraxis's tendrils rippled. And if their solution is as brutal as these 30 methods, then you'll have to decide whether you'd rather be ethical or alive, Beck said bluntly. The Krenth won't give you the luxury of both. Phylaxis's crystalline structure dimmed. This sets a dangerous precedent. So does extinction, Threnak said. He stood from his seat, his prosthetic arm gleaming. The council will vote. All in favor of granting Cadet Kim and his team 48 hours to develop a strategic response to the Krenth invasion? 7 seats lit up with approval indicators. 4 remained dark. One abstained. "The motion carries," Threnok said. "Cadet Kim, you have 48 hours and full access to military intelligence. Myung Park, Taejin Choi, you'll assist him. Admiral Bayek will supervise." Do-Yun felt his heart racing. "Yes, Overseer. We won't let you down." "Don't make me regret this," Threnok said quietly. "And Kim, remember that just because you can think of 30 ways to destroy something doesn't mean you should use all 30. Choose wisely." As the council members filed out, Velrith's voice crackled through a communication link. "Kim, I'm watching for medical. Do what you did on that examination, but make it count. Show them what human strategic thinking really means." Do-Hyun looked at Myung and Tae-jin. They both nodded. They had 48 hours to prove humanity belonged in the stars, or to confirm every fear the galaxy had about letting humans into their wars. The strategy. The tactical planning room was smaller than Do-Hyun expected. 3 walls displayed real-time data streams from the outer colonies, ship movements, casualty reports, resource distributions, and enemy positions flowed past in multiple languages and visual formats. The 4th wall was transparent, showing the curve of the planet below and the darkness of space beyond. Do-Hyun stood before the main holographic display with Myung and Tae-jin on either side. Admiral Bayek sat in the corner, observing silently. They had been working for 14 hours straight. Coffee cups and empty food containers littered the table behind them. "Show me the Krenth communication intercepts again," Do-Hyun said. Myung pulled up the data. Streams of biological signals, pheromone markers, and behavioral patterns filled the display. The Krenth didn't use radio or quantum communications like most galactic species. They communicated through complex chemical signals that their ships could detect across vast distances. "It's elegant," Taejin said, studying the patterns. "Each pheromone combination carries multiple layers of information: location, threat assessment, resource availability, tactical priorities, all in one chemical signal." "It's also vulnerable," Do-Hyun replied. He began marking specific patterns on the display. "Look at this sequence. It repeats every time they coordinate an attack. This is their command structure signaling." Myung leaned closer. "You think we can disrupt it?" "Better than that. We can fake it." Admiral Bayek stood and walked to the display. "Explain." "The Krenth assume their pheromone communication is secure because no other species uses it," Do-Hyun said. "But we've been intercepting their signals for 40 years. We have massive databases of their communication patterns. We know what different signals mean." "We can't produce pheromones," Tae-jin pointed out. "No, but we can synthesize them. We already do it for research purposes." Do-Hyun pulled up chemical composition data. "The Galactic Research Institute has facilities that can create any biological compound. We just need to produce Krenth pheromones in large enough quantities." "And then what?" Bayek asked. "Spray perfume at them?" Do-Hyun smiled. "Method 4 from my examination: psychological warfare. We make them think their own command structure is giving orders it's not giving." Understanding dawned on Myung's face. "We create false queen signals. Make them think their leadership is somewhere it isn't. Or make different hive clusters think the others have gone rogue," Taejin added, excitement building in his voice. "The Krenth have 17 distinct hive clusters in this invasion force. What if we make each cluster think the others are competing for resources?" Do-Hyun pointed to the tactical display. "Exactly, but we need to layer the approach. Disruption alone won't work. We need multiple pressure points." He began outlining the strategy on the holographic display, pulling elements from various methods in his examination. Phase 1. Deploy synthetic pheromones throughout the invasion zone. We need to create confusion first. Make their coordination break down. Phase 2. Introduce false command signals. We identify the pheromone patterns for high-priority commands. Retreat orders, resource redistribution, threat warnings, we flood their communication with contradictory signals. Phase 3. We exploit their biology. Taejin, you said the Krenth reproductive cycle depends on specific environmental triggers? Taejin nodded, pulling up xenobiology data. They need certain temperature ranges and chemical compositions to reproduce. Change those conditions, and their population growth stalls. Can we modify their food sources? Do-hyun asked. Theoretically, yes. Introduce trace elements that are harmless to them but alter their environmental chemistry. It would take months to impact reproduction, though. We have months if we can stop the invasion now, Mi-young said. Long-term strategic thinking. Admiral Bayek studied the emerging plan with interest. You're combining immediate tactical disruption with long-term strategic pressure. The pheromone warfare handles the short term. The biological modification handles the long term. And we add a third element, Do-hyun said. Economic isolation. The Krenth trade with 17 neutral systems. Those systems provide resources the Krenth can't produce themselves. We pressure those neutral systems to cut trade. How? Beck asked. Diplomatic and economic leverage. The Galactic Council controls access to major trade routes. Make it clear that supporting the Krenth means losing access to galactic markets. Most neutral systems will choose economics over loyalty. Mi-young was already running calculations. If we cut their external resources while modifying their internal biology, we create a resource crisis that compounds over time. They'll have to choose between maintaining the invasion or ensuring their own survival. That's cold, Taejin said quietly. That's effective, Do-hyun countered. And it saves lives. How many civilians have died in the last 14 hours? Taejin checked the casualty reports. Estimated 40,000. How many will die if this invasion continues for another month? Millions. Then cold is acceptable if it stops that, Do-hyun said. He turned back to the holographic display and began detailing each phase of the operation. Resource requirements, timeline estimates, potential complications. The same format he had used in his examination, but now applied to a real crisis. Admiral Bayek watched him work and spoke quietly to Mi-young. He's good at this. He's been preparing his whole life, Mi-young replied. His family has military history going back generations. His grandfather told him stories about every war Earth ever fought. Do-hyun remembers all of it. Is that a gift or a curse? Maybe both. 2 hours later, they had a complete strategy. Do-hyun compiled everything into a formal presentation and transmitted it to Overseer Threnak. The response came back within minutes. Council chamber, 1 hour, bring everything. The 3 humans cleaned up quickly, trying to make themselves presentable. They had been awake for 16 hours, living on coffee and adrenaline. Do-hyun's eyes burned with fatigue, but his mind was sharp. This was what he had trained for. When they entered the council chamber, they found it more crowded than before. Military commanders from multiple species filled the observation areas. The 12 council seats were occupied, including Velrith, who had insisted on attending despite medical advice. Do-hyun stood in the center once again and began his presentation. The holographic display showed each phase of the operation in detail. He explained the pheromone warfare, the biological modifications, the economic isolation. He anticipated questions and answered them before they were asked. When he finished, the chamber was silent. Finally, Current Keeper spoke. This plan would work. Yes, Do-hyun agreed. It would also fragment the Krenth swarm permanently. They might never reunify. Yes. You're not just stopping an invasion. You're destroying their civilization. Do-hyun met the Aquarian's gaze. I'm saving 17 million civilians in the outer colonies. If the Krenth civilization can't survive without invading others, then maybe it shouldn't survive. Phylaxis's crystalline structure flickered. That's genocide. No, Admiral Bayek interjected. Genocide is the intentional destruction of a people. This plan fragments their political structure and makes them unable to coordinate large-scale invasions. Individual Krynth will survive. Their culture will survive. But their ability to threaten the galaxy will end. The distinction seems thin, Phylaxis said. The distinction, Threnak rumbled, is that Cadet Kim's plan doesn't require killing billions of Krynth. It requires making them stop killing us. I'll take that trade. Syraxis's tendrils moved in complex patterns. This is human strategic thinking. You don't just win wars. You end them. We learned the hard way, Do-Yun said. Earth fought 2 world wars in the 20th century. Millions died. After the second one, we realized victory without permanent resolution just guarantees another war. So we learned to think long-term, to create conditions where conflict becomes impossible. By destroying your enemy's ability to fight, Current Keeper observed. By removing the incentive to fight, Do-Hyun corrected. The Krynth invade because they need resources and can coordinate massive forces. This plan solves both problems. We cut their resources through isolation. We eliminate coordination through pheromone disruption. And we ensure they can't simply rebuild by modifying their reproductive biology. None of it requires mass killing. All of it achieves lasting peace. Velrith spoke for the first time. His voice was still weak but clear. I collapsed in the examination hall because I saw how ruthlessly efficient human thinking can be. Now I'm grateful for it. This plan is brutal in its thoroughness, but it will save millions of lives and end a threat that has plagued us for decades. The vote was swift. 11 seats approved. Only Phylaxis abstained, her crystalline structure dim with uncertainty. Threnak stood. The Council authorizes implementation of Cadet Kim's strategy. Admiral Bayek, you'll coordinate with the Galactic Defense Force. Kim, Park, Choi, you're assigned as tactical advisors for the duration of the operation. One more thing, Velrith added. This plan succeeds because it draws from human experience. Perhaps it's time we admit that humanity brings something valuable to the galactic community. Something we need, even if it makes us uncomfortable. Admiral Bayek smiled. We prefer to make you comfortable, but we'll settle for keeping you alive. The execution. The command ship Eternal Vigilance hung in high orbit above Sanctuary Station, the main military hub for the Outer Colony's defense. Its bridge was massive, designed to accommodate command staff from multiple species. Holographic displays covered every surface, showing fleet positions, resource flows, and real-time tactical data from 17 colony worlds. Do-Hyun stood at a tactical station near the center of the bridge, flanked by Myung and Taijin. Admiral Bayek commanded from the central chair, with Overseer Threnak serving as her military liaison. Around them, officers from a dozen species worked at their stations, coordinating the largest joint military operation in galactic history. Phase 1 had begun 6 hours ago. Pheromone dispersal at 73%. Myung reported, monitoring logistics data. Chemical synthesis facilities are running at maximum capacity. We're producing synthetic Krynth pheromones faster than projected. Taijin studied biological sensor data. The Krynth are responding. Their attack formations are becoming disorganized. Individual hive clusters are showing confusion patterns in their movement. Do-Hyun watched the tactical display as hundreds of Krynth ships began breaking from coordinated assault patterns. The tight, efficient swarms that had overwhelmed initial defense forces were fragmenting into smaller, less effective groups. It's working, one of the Quellan tactical officers said, his tendrils moving in amazed patterns. They're fighting themselves. Not yet, Do-Hyun cautioned. They're confused, but still coordinated enough to be dangerous. We need to push harder. Admiral Bayek nodded. Begin Phase 2. Transmit the false command signals. Across the fleet, specially modified communication ships began broadcasting synthetic pheromone patterns. These weren't random signals. Each one was carefully crafted based on 40 years of intercepted Krenth communication data. Retreat orders, resource redistribution commands, threat warnings about rival hive clusters. The effect was immediate and dramatic. On the tactical display, Krenth fleet formations began to fracture. Ships that had been moving in unified swarms suddenly turned on each other. Fighting broke out between different hive clusters. Some clusters began retreating from contested worlds. Others rushed toward resource caches that didn't exist, chasing false promises of abundant supplies. Krenth combat activity decreasing by 20%, a Vorgath tactical officer reported. No, 25%. They're pulling back from 3 colony worlds. Colony World Epsilon 7 reports the Krenth ground forces are withdrawing, another officer announced. No explanation. They're just leaving. Velrith, who was observing from a medical station at the edge of the bridge, spoke through his communication link. Cadet Kim, explain what we're seeing. Do-hyun pointed to the tactical display. We're exploiting their communication system against them. Each hive cluster thinks it's receiving legitimate orders from the central queen structure. But the orders contradict each other. Cluster 7 thinks Cluster 9 is trying to steal resources. Cluster 9 thinks Cluster 11 has gone rogue. The central coordination that made them so effective is now making them paranoid and divided. You turned their greatest strength into their greatest weakness, Velrith observed. It's an old human tactic, Admiral Bayek said. In ancient Earth history, armies used false flag operations and misinformation constantly. We just applied the same principle to pheromone communication. Colony World Beta Station reports Krenth forces are fighting each other, another officer called out. Ground combat has completely stopped. They're shooting their own ships. Mi-young pulled up casualty projections. If this trend continues, we're looking at 97% reduction in civilian deaths compared to conventional warfare scenarios. What about Krenth casualties? Phylaxis asked. She had come aboard to observe, still uncomfortable with the operation but unwilling to ignore it. Taejin checked xenobiological sensors. Surprisingly low. Most of the fighting is posturing and territorial display. They're not trying to kill each other, just establish dominance. It's like watching animals fight for hierarchy rather than nations fighting for survival. Because we're triggering instinctive responses, Do-hyun explained. The false signals make them think they're competing for resources within their own species structure. That's different from fighting an external enemy. Internal competition in Krenth culture rarely results in death. So you're saving both our people and theirs, Phylaxis said quietly. That was the idea, Do-hyun replied. 3 days into the operation, Phase 3 began. Diplomatic vessels visited the 17 neutral systems that traded with the Krenth. The message was simple and clear. Continue supporting the Krenth and lose access to galactic trade routes, or sever ties and maintain your economic prosperity. 15 systems chose economics. 2 remained neutral, but stopped active trade. None continued supporting the Krenth invasion. Resource analysis shows Krenth supply lines are collapsing, Mi-young reported on the 5th day. They're running low on fuel, ammunition, and food supplies. Without external trade, they can't sustain military operations at this scale. Colony World reports continue to improve, Taejin added. The Krenth aren't retreating yet, but they're consolidating into defensive positions. They're no longer attacking. Begin Phase 4, Admiral Bayek ordered. Implement the biological modifications. This phase was the most delicate. Special operations teams inserted modified food supplies into Krenth supply chains. The modifications were subtle, adding trace elements that would gradually alter the environmental chemistry in Krenth ships and colonies. Nothing harmful, just enough to make reproduction more difficult. Over months and years, the Krenth population growth would slow naturally. This phase will take time to show results, Do-hyun told the assembled command staff. But combined with the communication disruption and economic isolation, it ensures the Krenth can't simply rebuild their invasion force in a few years. By the end of the second week, the Krenth invasion had effectively ended. The 17 hive clusters that had worked together so efficiently were now scattered, disorganized, and unable to coordinate. Some clusters had retreated entirely. Others held defensive positions, but showed no interest in advancing. A few continued fighting each other over territory and resources. The outer colonies had been saved. Casualty estimates that had predicted millions of deaths had been revised down to fewer than 100,000. Most of those deaths had occurred in the first days of the invasion, before Do-hyun's plan had been implemented. In the command ship's briefing room, the 3 human cadets sat with Admiral Bayek and Overseer Threnak, reviewing the operation's results. "The Council is pleased," Threnak said. His gravelly voice carried a tone of satisfaction. "You achieved what conventional military doctrine said was impossible. You stopped a Krenth invasion without a major fleet engagement." "We had advantages," Do-hyun said modestly. 40 years of intelligence data, advanced chemical synthesis capability, and a communication system we could exploit. "You had creativity?" Velrith's voice came through the communication link. He was still in medical, but recovering well. "Traditional galactic military thinking would have thrown fleets at the problem until one side was destroyed. You thought asymmetrically. You found the weakness nobody else saw." Admiral Bayek stood and walked to the transparent wall, looking out at the stars. "This is what humans bring to the galactic community. We spent 10,000 years fighting each other with every weapon and tactic imaginable. We learned hard lessons. And now those lessons can protect others." "At what cost?" Phylaxis asked. She had joined the briefing remotely, her crystalline form visible through holographic projection. "You've permanently fractured the Krenth civilization. They may never reunify." "Is that a bad thing?" Myung asked. "A unified Krenth swarm was a threat to everyone. 17 independent clusters can trade, cooperate, and coexist. They're not destroyed, they're just different." "And unable to invade anyone," Taejin added. "Which makes everyone safer, including the Krenth themselves. They lost fewer members in this operation than they would have in a conventional war." Threnak nodded slowly. "The human cadets make a valid point. This operation achieved something remarkable. It ended a war and saved lives on both sides. That's more than victory. That's wisdom." "Other species are requesting human tactical advisors," Admiral Beck said. "The Vorgath want humans for their border conflicts. The Aquarians want help with pirate suppression. Even the Quellans are asking about exchange programs." "Humanity's reputation has changed in 2 weeks," Threnak observed. "You went from being viewed as primitive newcomers to being recognized as strategic innovators." Do-hyun felt the weight of that change. "We didn't want to be known for warfare. We wanted to be known for exploration, science, diplomacy." "You can be known for all of those," Velrith said. "But the galaxy also needs to know you can protect them, that you have the knowledge and creativity to solve problems others can't. Your examination frightened us because it showed how ruthlessly you can think. But this operation showed us that ruthless thinking can save lives when applied with wisdom." Admiral Bayek turned back to the room. "The Council is offering humanity a permanent seat on the Galactic Defense Strategic Council. They want human input on military doctrine, tactical planning, and strategic policy." "That's a big responsibility," Myung said. "It's also recognition," Bayek replied. "The galaxy is accepting that humanity has something valuable to offer, something necessary." Do-hyun looked at his fellow humans. Myung, who had coordinated logistics for an entire fleet. Taejin, who had identified biological vulnerabilities nobody else had seen. They had proven themselves not through violence, but through understanding violence so well they could minimize it. "What happens now?" Taejin asked. "Now you graduate. Threnek said. With highest honors, all three of you, and then you begin the real work of showing the galaxy what humanity can do. Through the communication link, Velrith added one final thought. You asked for 3 ways to eliminate a threat on that examination. You gave us 30. But what you really showed us was something more important. You showed us 30 different ways to think about problems. That flexibility, that creativity, that refusal to accept conventional limitations, that's humanity's gift to the galaxy. Use it wisely.